guys, Zach Reiser here, and welcome back to another Bass Effects review video. Today we are going to be getting into the raucous world of the Fjord Fuzz Fenris. So if you're not familiar with Fjord Fuzz, they are known for building some truly out there fuzz devices, and the Fenris is no exception. I have really never played a fuzz that quite responds like the Fenris. For one thing, it is, I think, the most dynamic fuzz pedal I've ever played, in the sense that what you send into it drastically affects what you're going to get out of it on the other side. Starting with the two simplest controls on the Fenris, we have volume in the top left and gain on the bottom left. Now, the gain knob is very unique on the Fenris for a fuzz pedal because it is truly useful in the entire range of the knob, and you get a lot of very interesting, cool sounds at every step along the way. So the two controls in the top right here are controlling different biasing aspects of the pedal. And on the top right here, this is essentially a gating knob, but it's not the way you would think of a gate in the usual sense. It's a very subtle effect, and in my opinion, it's more kind of how open the character of the fuzz is. So is it like spitty and splatty, or is it just raw in your face fuzz? Underneath that, probably one of the most important knobs on the pedal, this is going to be kind of how you tune your octave, or how much octave is in your fuzz. Now, when it's at noon is actually max octave, and then on either side of the knob is going to be different flavors of less octave. And then probably the two most confusing and most interactive controls on the pedal is the filter frequency here, and then kind of, you can think of it as like the filter depth in the middle left here. The filter frequency, you'll see in a second, is a very wide-ranging frequency knob in terms of really high to really low. And then the filter depth, you can think of as filter depth, but you also can think of it as like how much of the rest of your signal is being rolled back in. So, without further ado, here's my bass's dry tone Dingwall ABZ 6-string on the neck pickup. And now let's hear that into the Fenris, all knobs at noon. So with the settings as shown like this on the Fenris, you're hearing I'm getting a pretty pronounced octave up effect, and that's because this knob is at noon. But I'm still getting a nice fat bottom end because my frequency knob is at noon as well. So let's play with the gain knob a little bit. We're going to go from like spongy analog octave up sounds to just in your face, destroying your speakers fuzz. So I want to show off the range of the filter knob down here, and the easiest way to do that is by rolling the filter depth all the way up, or down in this case. I've actually heard from Fjord Fuzz that they're thinking of flipping the polarity of this knob because it's a little confusing to certain people. But one way you can think about this knob to make it a little more logical is it's kind of how much of the rest of your frequencies, or like the mids of your frequencies, are in the signal. So if you roll it up, you're rolling in more of the frequencies. If you roll it down, you're really only getting the stuff around that filter cutoff. So as you can hear, this knob goes from very thin and anemic all the way to super huge and fat and bassy on the other side of the knob. So now to hear kind of the effect of that filter depth, or mids knob if you want to think of it that way, I'm going to pick two different frequency spots. One is going to be kind of scooped and bassy, and then one is going to be more high-end and crunchy. And you're going to hear that it goes from being very pronounced EQ settings to a little bit more of just like a flavor on the fuzz as you roll in those other frequencies. Starting with scooped and bassy. Now let's hear kind of that thinner, crunchier fuzz tone. There is tons of EQ range in these two knobs, and when I first got the pedal, it took me quite a while, honestly, to dial these in to figure out kind of what I liked and what I didn't like. And they're also pretty interactive with these two knobs as well, but for the most part, the settings I have shown here is kind of my favorite settings for these two knobs. It's giving me a decent amount of bass, but it's not like woofy and big and bloomy in the bottom end, and then I have basically all of the mids rolled in because I like hearing as much of my bass's frequency come through the fuzz as I can. Quickly, I want to show just this top right kind of gating or biasing knob on the fuzz circuit. This is the most subtle control on the pedal, but let's hear what this knob sounds like throughout the range setting as shown. So the last control to show up on the Fenris is this octave knob, and it's probably the most important control for shaping the overall character of the fuzz sound, except for maybe the gain knob. Now, as I said before, the most pronounced octave is actually when the control is at noon, which is a little counterintuitive. And then when you go to either side of noon, you're getting different flavors of kind of less octave. It's a little more raw, traditional fuzz sounding on the clockwise side of that knob. On the counterclockwise side, you're still going to get some octave up, but it's like a less controlled version of the octave up. And that brings me to my last point about the octave knob, and that's when you're at noon, it's not only the most pronounced octave, but it's also the most controllable the pedal will feel. And what I mean by that is that when it's at noon, it's going to be kind of the most gated, it's going to be the most quiet, and it's going to be very articulate. So it's not going to be quite as spongy and open as it is when you're at other spots of the throw of that octave knob. So starting at noon, I'm going to roll clockwise first, which is going to be going towards, in my opinion, the more kind of traditional fuzz tones. Also, when you go fully clockwise, it's the least amount of upper octave you're going to get in this pedal. Let's see if we can get the most open-ended saturated fuzz tone by rolling both of these knobs fully clockwise. because we're playing a Fjord Fuzz fuzz pedal, let's crank the gain knob on this open saturated setting. Going back to noon, let's now roll counterclockwise, which is always going to retain some upper octave, but it just gets less controlled and a little bit more raw as you go towards the full counterclockwise side. So hopefully by now you have a good idea of how many different crazy flavors of fuzz you can get with the Fenris, but I also hope that you're noticing that it is unbelievably articulate. I've never played a fuzz that's this big, this raw, this saturated, and you can still hear all the little notes, all the runs, all my dynamics. When I accent a note, it's actually louder, even when the fuzz is squashing and compressing everything like that. It's really pretty freaking rad. All right, we've reached the point in this video where all my viewers know I gotta start throwing a bunch of stuff into this thing because I know it's gonna sound wicked. So starting with my kind of overall favorite setting on the Fenris, nice solid pronounced octave up, solid amount of gating going on, very controlled. Let's hear what this sounds like by itself first. And now I'm going to take my pure octave down signal from my Boss OC2, everybody knows it, sounds like this, and run that into these settings on the Fenris. First thing we can do to quickly make this super synthy sounding is just to detune our overall sound here. So I'm going to run the OC2 into the Fenris into a detune setting on my Eventide H9, and that sounds like this. Sticking with our Boss OC2 Fenris combo, I'm going to now run those two into my Moog low-pass filter to get some really big, sweeping synth textures. And I'm also going to run that into a little bit of delay just to add some ambience. So let's change the sound that we're running into the Fenris. So instead of that pure sub signal, which yet again sounds like this, we're going to run a more traditional octaver sound. So I'm going to put my dry signal back in. And let's try running that into the Fenris. let's go back to just the Fenris for a second. So this is a more kind of open sounding classic bass fuzz, and I'm going to run this into just some nice delay and reverb for kind of some like sludgy ambience. Let's take the Fenris for a little bit of a kind of melodic ride here. So I'm going to take this octave up setting, run it into a little bit of delay and reverb on the Strymon Volante. And specifically, I want you to take notice how the Fenris actually retains my picking dynamics. And not just the character of my picking dynamics, but also the volume. It's one of the few fuzzes I've ever played that actually can be quiet when I play quiet and be loud when I play loud. Let's get a little bit synthy again. I got my Boss OC2 running back into the Fenris. OC2 is just the sub signal, by the way. And we're going to take both of those into an envelope-controlled filter on my Moog MF101. Last sound for you here. I have a fifth from my Electro Harmonics Hog 2, a harmonized setting. It sounds like this. Running that into this more raw octave up sound on the Fenris. And then just because I can, we're going to run that into a big harmonic tremolo on my Eventide H9. So that is my demo of the Fjord Fuzz Fenris. If you are looking for a fuzz pedal that is slightly off the beaten path, I highly recommend you dig into this thing. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It really does help me out, and I will be back very shortly with more pedals and effects review videos as well as some performance videos. Thanks for watching. Bye.